Dear Dr. Rajmohan, Excellencies, friends, we are entering into the most important part of this conference, namely the keynote address by one of the very renowned strategic thinkers and writers of our country, Sri Rajmohan. This conference of 2 days on what has been very aptly described as the constitution of the seas, the UNCLOS, is very important for the reason that it is being hosted by and hosted for the lay people, the citizens, the Aam Janata, to understand the importance of the seas and importance of the need for maintaining order on the seas as well. Thus far, discussions on such very important but also very technical subjects used to be limited to experts, governmental agencies, but this is for the first time that we try to take it into the domain of public intellectuals and even general public. Because we believe that just as the rule of law or the constitution of the land should be understood by every citizen in order for it to be better implemented, law of the seas also should be understood by the people, not necessarily the intricacies of it, but at least that a law exists to guide the behavior of the countries on the seas also. Otherwise, as Mr. Akbar has suggested, that since the ocean is named after India, an average Indian would think that this ocean belongs to India. Any other country can think on the same lines just because the name implies that a country's name can be a part of any sea, or it can be South China Sea and anybody can think it is my sea. Just as lack of understanding leads to these things. So it is important that we understand that we are all guided by certain common laws for the benefit of managing global commons. With this objective, we thought that we will bring together some experts, but also some public intellectuals on the same platform to talk in depth about this important subject, which has become important for various reasons in the last few years. So I have the great honor and privilege of inviting Dr. Rajmohan to deliver the keynote address for this conference. Dr. Rajmohan, podium is yours.
Sri Ramadan, distinguished members of the audience today, it's a special privilege here to come to these islands. I've not missed an opportunity to be here because I think when India realizes its maritime destiny, these islands will be very central and will have a very prominent role in India's maritime future. So it was a special privilege, I think, to be invited by Sri Ramadan and the India Foundation for me to come and speak to you this evening. But it's also an awful situation to stand between dinner and it's not a great time to make a keynote address, but we will try and keep it brief and end it on time. when Sri Madhav invited me, I said, look, I'm not a legal expert, so why should I be here? I mean, I think it really might be out of sync with the larger, more technical discussion that we're going to see in the next 2 days on the various intricacies of UNCLOS. So what he did was to encourage me to think more politically and strategically about the issues that have emerged recently in relation to UNCLOS, and I think to look at that. So I thought it was a good moment then to reflect on the dynamic intersection today that we're seeing between law and power. That the connection between the two is never can be underestimated, and we've seen in last year in the wake of the PCA judgment on the South China Sea and China's refusal to abide by it or even to acknowledge the jurisdiction of the Permanent Court of Arbitration, that the tension between law and power is undeniable. And I think what we're seeing today in the Western Pacific is growing tension between China and its neighbors, China and Japan in the East China Sea, between China, Vietnam, and Philippines and others in the South China Sea, and between China and the United States, the major maritime powers, on the question of the jurisdiction of the states over coastal waters and the question of freedom of navigation. So I think the issue that what we're seeing today is quite central because the future of this part of the world is going to be quite decided by the kind of outcomes that we're going to see on the issues that are being raised by the law of the sea and the contestation over it. I think the problematic for us is no one can deny the power of law and norms in shaping international society. But no decision maker can also ignore the laws of power. And that the two are not the same. That while the power of law to create new set of propositions and provide a basis on which we can live together, the laws of power have their own impact on how even the laws are crafted. That the relationship between the nature of power, the distribution of power within the international system, and its impact on crafting and implementing laws is quite real. And I think this becomes even more important today as the tectonic plates of power distribution move in the Western Pacific, and the contestation, I think, on the waters of Asia, I think are going to get a lot more complicated. It's also a moment, I think, of technological transformation that Mr. Akbar talked about. And as we develop new technologies and explore ever new frontiers, Mr. Akbar referred to the oceans, the skies, and the space, cyberspace, that we'll be looking at. I think there is going to be this continual tension between power and principle, between might and right, and between collective good and the interests of the great powers. So these multiple tensions are going to play themselves out. We've seen it right now in the case of law of the sea here, that we've seen where the Philippines, for example, the Philippines ambassador is here, so I don't want to say too many things, but the fact is that the Philippines won the argument comprehensively in the permanent court of arbitration, but it probably lost the argument in the realm of power. So that is a tension, that you could win the argument in law, but you can't necessarily, that does not mean you win the argument in the real world. And I think that is the tension we got to understand. And it is not a question of saying who's right or who's wrong, but the logic today of this unending tension between power and law that we have to deal with it. So my presentation, I thought I'll make it in 3 parts. In the first one, I explore the enduring tension, what I mentioned today, between law and power. In the second part, I'd like to talk about a potential pathway to a rules-based order in our region. And then I conclude with a discussion on creating a cooperative framework in the Bay of Bengal, whose lab we are right now sitting, and looking forward. So the first part is on the tension between power and international law. As we discuss it, and I think one of the central caveats we have to remember is that there is a difference between domestic law and international law. We can talk about a constitution, that's a metaphorical thing. But there is no constitution in the international sphere. That is, while the scope of the norms of international law have dramatically expanded in the last century, we don't have a world government. And I'm not sure many people think it's a good idea, that without a world government, without absolute unanimity among all states on what the rules are, we don't have a consensus on how to implement the norms that you might have negotiated, you might have signed. And the difference is quite clearly we've seen in UNCLOS, even interpreting the agreements that we signed. That is a problem. And I think the central to this is, in the domestic realm, there is a Supreme Court, there is the armed forces, which are the monopoly of power, which have the right to adjudicate and resolve disputes between competing groups within the domestic sphere. But international sphere, there is no higher court. There is no capacity to enforce what we see, what we might all agree something is good, but there is no higher authority that can enforce the constitution. So therefore, I think that is the central problem that we have to deal with, and how we deal with it is the challenge, because rules are only as good as the enforcement. Rules that can't be enforced can be very good, but they mean really very little in the real world. So therefore, the absence of a higher authority, the reality of a anarchic international system, especially in the security domain, will keep posing problems of how do we deal with the collective good in a context of sovereign states within a system where the major powers have greater say in the way that things are organized. Second, I think this notion of law and power is rooted in the very origin of international law of the seas. And not far from here to the east, something happened in 1603. The Dutch captured a ship called Santa Catarina that belonged to the Portuguese. It was laden with a lot of goodies from China and Japan, sold them in markets in Europe, and they almost doubled their capital by selling these goods that were looted from another ship. Now, it was for the Dutch East India Company, it was quite a good turn of events. But then there was a small group within the shareholders, religious guys, they were called Mennonites, who said, look, is it really the right thing to do to have loot, of making money on loot? So the Dutch East India Company, the Dutch have a bit of a moral compunction, as we know, and they hired a man called Grotius and said, look, you've got to make a public case to justify what we've done. Therefore, Grotius created this argument that, look, the Portuguese, the Pope had drawn the line and given one part of the seas to the Portuguese and the other part to the Spanish. He said, no, sea belongs to everyone. Sea is not closed by monopolies of two countries, that these belong to everyone. And therefore, the idea of open seas was the long pamphlet that Grotius wrote for the Dutch East India Company. And of course, that became the basis on which international law of the sea, of what you said of a shared space, of sea as an open frontier, sea as equal common heritage of mankind, which UNCLOS talks about, had its origins in that. But it also tells you the story of rising powers and falling powers. Portugal was one of the first great powers. Dutch capitalism was pushing Netherlands to come up as a new great power, and I think eventually the Dutch capitalism prevailed over the mercantilism of the Portuguese, and I think laid the foundation later for the Anglo-Saxons to create the larger law of the sea. So therefore, this question that norms don't come on their own. Norms come from contestation for power, and the dominant powers set the rules. And I think that is something we can't forget as we look to the future. That brings us to the question of China's own approach to international law. So when US, Japan, or India talk about the rule-based global order, a rules-based regional order, the Chinese say, look, I didn't make those rules, so I'm not bound by them. That these are not my rules. These are rules that the colonial powers made, the imperial powers made, the Western powers made, and I had a century of humiliation, therefore I don't much care for your rules-based order. So therefore the Chinese question the very legitimacy of the argument of rules-based order, which they see as a way of denying them their space to become the great power. The second argument, of course, when the Chinese say, I don't respect the rules that I did not make, they're also trying to make new rules. That, as you know, in law, possession is 9/10 of law. So the Chinese can argue today, what is a new strategy called lawfare, using legal arguments to justify what you do. And lawfare is quite central. It's not warfare, but lawfare is one of the elements of modern conflict, which the Chinese call it the three warfares. There is the media public opinion, warfare for public opinion, the warfare of psychological warfare, and finally the lawfare of using legal arguments, of creating laws, of creating domestic laws, basis which you say, this is my legal understanding. So it is actually the tension, the contestation is between, for the Chinese to prove Americans are the ones are not abiding by the rules, they're the ones who are abiding by the rules. So the question of law, so it's not just about saying UNCLOS is great. The question is, how do we deal with the shifting power equations within that framework that is challenging the whole order? And I think it's a problem for us, those of us who are China's neighbors, whether we've seen it in Doklam or whether we've seen it in the Vietnamese and the Philippines have seen it in South China Sea. The Chinese use legal arguments or say, look, this is all imperial stuff. But that's not going to solve my problem of how I deal with the Chinese power. Therefore, when the Chinese can make arguments like we saw them make the argument India had no reason to be involved in Doklam, or that actually UNCLOS does not apply to their historic claims in South China Sea, then we have a problem of Chinese power. It's not just about the law, it is about the Chinese power and the capacity of China to create new facts on the ground, to justify those on the basis of its own rules, and then create a new fait accompli that everyone has to live with. And I think that problem is not in law. That problem is rooted in the rising Chinese capabilities and what it does. So therefore, power is as important at this point to understand the changes in power that are taking place in Asia's waters to be able to deal with the extraordinary challenge that we face in terms of, can we construct rules of some kind? Because after all, in the past when China was inward-looking, India was inward-looking, what happened in the seas did not matter. It was a matter of argument between different European powers. Today, Asia's economic future, its prosperity depends entirely on having a good order at sea, because India's own trade, almost 40% of its trade takes place by sea. 40% of the GDP today is trade, and most of the trade takes place on sea. Therefore, the seas have never been as important for India as they are today. And China's dependence on the seas is even more. Well, Japan and Korea have historically, as they're among the first countries to build modern capitalism, have been dependent on the seas. So we never, Asian prosperity today depends on the waters of Asia. And precisely at this moment today, we have no agreement at all on what the rules ought to be in constructing a common arrangement, which Minister Akbar talked about earlier. So that brings me to the second question of a rules-based order. Are there pathways to a rules-based order that we can think of? Here, I must say, as a realist, I would say, look, power will prevail over law, but that's not the whole argument. I mean, that power is important, but the question of norms too are important, because norms over a longer period of time set certain standards, set certain framework in which we all operate. So I would say while norms have expanded and we all would want norms be accepted by everyone, I would say don't bet on it. It's not enough. You can have the norms, right? We need norms, but norms are not going to be sufficient to produce order, and And that's where the question of balance comes in. Equilibrium, when we talk about balance of power system becomes important to deal with the question of the laws and who enforces the laws and who underwrites a set of laws. Now, since the Second World War, it's largely the US that has provided the balance of power framework, invented it, and has done it for the last 70 years. But today, the American primacy in Asia is being contested by China. And there is this tension, like when the Chinese say that, look, the US is the dominant power, therefore when the US says certain rules apply, they say we can't accept it. But underlying that is really a tension for domination of Western Pacific, which is the Americans as the long-standing hegemons of the region, and the Chinese as the ones who are contesting that primacy that exists. And this is not just merely an argument in law. As the Chinese military power expands, their capacity to threaten American forward military presence, because Americans have been sitting on the so-called first island chain, which includes Japan, Philippines, Taiwan, ASEAN. So if you see, look at the map, the screen of islands in front of China is the front yard of China. The Americans have been the dominant force on that frontier. Today the Chinese are saying, maybe it's time you moved a little bit. I mean, there's a famous saying of Mao Zedong, which he said, Americans are sleeping next to my bed, they snore a lot, it disturbs my sleep, but there's not much I can do today. That is, we're talking about the 50s when the Komatsu crisis was going on. But then he said, but someday we're going to tell the Americans, sir, you're disturbing my sleep, would you like to move a little? So when you get the elbows to push a bigger power in your own region, then you're beginning to see the breakdown, not just of the power balance, but of the legal system that we are seeing. And there is an argument today between the Americans and the Chinese about, are there going to be new rules of behavior in this part of the world? And when the Americans used to talk about a responsible stakeholder, China must be a responsible stakeholder. China is saying, no, there's going to be a new type of great power relations. So the argument is not about whether there should be a deal. The deal on whose terms. That is the argument. Whose rules? That is the question, and that's where I think the problem is going to be for the Chinese and the Americans argument of what kind of rules will be decided and by whom. That is the question, and that poses a problem for the rest of us in the region. If the Americans and the Chinese come to terms on a new set of rules, will they suit us? If there is a G2, or if there is a condominium, or if there is a contestation, the problem then becomes how those rules get drafted and whether we can live with those rules. Because in Asia, we're not small countries. Even Philippines has 100 million people, India has 1 billion, Vietnam has close to 100, Indonesia has more than 250. So we talk about large countries here. This is not just about US and China. Therefore, what do we do to make sure that our interest in a stable legal order is maintained? So I would think there are at least 2 or 3 things that we can do while the argument between the Americans and the Chinese goes on. One is, can we resolve the disputes between ourselves peacefully, legally? That is, we've seen at least in the Bay of Bengal already, that if we can set an example, that we can resolve our disputes. It's not enough saying China should observe the rules. But if we resolve the disputes between ourselves, as it happened in the case of India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, and between India and other Southeast Asian neighbors, then I think we're talking about at least setting a model example. And of at least excluding some spaces from contestation, which is what we've done. I think a lot of credit goes to Bangladesh for having taken this to jurisdiction. Knowing the Indian bureaucracy, if it was merely a question of the judgment, they were saying, we'll appeal or we'll go on. I mean, we can't accept it. But I think it was the government's decision. It was a political decision. It was not a legal argument that won in Delhi. The argument that won in Delhi under the Modi government was, Bangladesh is a friend, we want good relationship, so let's amicably resolve the maritime territorial dispute. And if the arbitration has helped us do that, because you left the 2 joint secretaries, they could have negotiated for another 100 years without resolving it. So it is a political judgment saying, we need a peaceful environment, we need good bilateral relationship, so that we accept a verdict which largely went in favor of Bangladesh. So therefore you can't separate politics and political judgment from how we go forward with UNCLOS. And I think that is the critical thing, that are we convinced of a peaceful future for ourselves, and that how we can cooperate within that. The second element of what we can do, and not blame the Americans or the Chinese for everything, is to expand security cooperation among ourselves. Nobody's stopping us. That we don't have to merely look at the Americans or the Chinese and say, India, Indonesia, India, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh. That there's a whole lot of things we can do, because we're not small countries. That while we might not be able to replace the Americans or the Chinese, we have enough capabilities to deny aggression or to raise the cost of aggression by someone who violates the rules-based order. But this is not something we've done effectively, and I think what we need to do is, in the coming years, a lot more mutual security cooperation in the seas, so that we create at least a phalanx, a bastion that can limit some of the unilateralism of the major powers, and I think that's where we need to do. And then a third element, of course, is that while big countries or big defense budgets, we can do some of these things, we also need to help some of the smaller countries to create capabilities. Island states, tiny islands in the Indian Ocean or the Indo-Pacific, own massive amounts of exclusive economic zone, but they don't have the capacities to patrol them, let alone manage them. And I think India has been doing good work, as Admiral Bador might tell us, helping hydrographic service of large number of countries in the region, of supplying equipment, or of creating shared maritime domain awareness. These are some of the things that we've begun to do, and I think there's a lot more to be done. That how we can, India, Japan, or India, Indonesia, how we can pool our resources to help smaller countries create the maritime capabilities, so that they don't become simple victims of unilateral policies by the dominant powers. That brings me to the last set of issues on the Bay of Bengal. It's one thing to talk in abstract about rules, about our UNCLOS, that what matters is what do we do in these waters. I think, as I said, the resolution of the maritime boundary disputes, I think, has provided a very good framework in which we need to step up and expand our cooperation, so that this part, the Bay of Bengal, if you look at the Indo-Pacific as a region, South China Sea and the Bay of Bengal are at the heart of that. While South China Sea is going to be disputed for a long time, that we can turn the Bay of Bengal into a cooperative zone between India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, the three large states, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Thailand, that if we get together to make this a zone of peace and cooperation, where we pool our resources and how we can construct a whole new framework for regional engagement. The Sri Lankan Prime Minister, Ranil Wickremesinghe, keeps talking about Sri Lanka's maritime identity. Sri Lanka is not just a South Asian country, but it is an Indian Ocean country. He's talked about, I would say, recommend, I don't know if the minister here can give us some of the speeches, but I think he's repeatedly mentioned the Bay of Bengal as a zone of historic, expansive cooperation that existed in the past. And I think the political challenge for us is today, can we revive some of those forms of cooperation across the waters? I mean, this would involve, I would say, expanding connectivity, creating links between South Asia and Southeast Asia, of turning the Bay of Bengal into a bridge between different parts of the world. That is South Asia and Southeast Asia. This would require, I think, a lot more purposeful effort. I think we have the legal basis today. We have the absence of disputes, and the question is, do we have the political will to take the next step? And I think sitting here in these islands, at the very center of Bay of Bengal, that I think the potential for reimagining the future of this part of the world, and that we can set a different example of how rules-based order can work, and how a rules-based order can actually promote significant substantive cooperation that will benefit the large number of people who live in this littoral. And within this, I think, of course, partly India as a big country has a lot of responsibility. One, to turn these islands first from a closed territory to an open platform that is accessible to all of the neighbors, and of creating a structure of regional cooperation in the Bay of Bengal, because island chain is right in the middle of the Bay of Bengal. And I think transforming the Andaman and Nicobar Islands will itself provide the basis for constructing a very, very different order. Therefore, I think the challenge for us in conclusion is there is both law and there is power. Both law and power both exist. We need both. And I think law, norms without power, principle without power is important. And you can keep talking about how great, how moral the policy is, but it has no real effectiveness because I think, who was it, Comrade Stalin who asked the Pope, I mean, how many divisions does the Pope have? That is, if you don't have the capacity to enforce, it doesn't matter how good the principle is. Similarly, but if it is about merely power without principle, then it lacks legitimacy, it lacks morality, it lacks authority. You might win in the short term, but you pay a high price. We're seeing some of that in the Middle East today. So we need both power and principle. We need both a balance of power system in the region as well as a rules-based order. And the challenge is how do you marry these two into constructing simultaneously that we can create both so that we provide a basis for expansive cooperation in this part of the world. So both law and power, both are important, and the question for us is to bring them together in alignment, in sync with each other, that will create a new environment. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Rajmohan, for that interesting and insightful keynote address. Law and power, power of the land, power of the in-law. So, friends, we have a few minutes for some questions and answers. House is open. You can ask questions to Dr. Rajmohan.
Thank you for that excellent analysis. But you talked about America and China, and you talked about the rest. How come you didn't talk about America, China, and India, and the rest? So why taking India out of that equation?
I don't think, India's, we like to make ourselves very great, but I don't think we are in a position at this point to match the Chinese or the American powers. So I think it's nice to say that India is one of the big powers, but today I think that India's future lies not presenting itself as one of the three big powers, but actually as one that partners its neighbors, develops a framework in which all of this can prosper. So I would say that that's precisely the reason why I strongly think India should be seen as a middle power, not as a great power at this point. So what it does in its region of creating a legal basis, of developing a rules-based order, of creating regional integration, which is I think what this government's emphasis on neighborhood first and of trying to develop the region as a whole, I would say stands for that. But at this point, all of us are going to have problems from a US-China relationship.
Yeah, obviously I see that, but I mean, so then what is India's role? I mean, is it just going to be one or the others, or perhaps, like you said, it's not a great power, but down the road maybe can create authority. But currently, in the next medium term, short to medium term, what's its role?
You see, given the subject that we have today, that 3-4 things which I said in there, that can we promote regional cooperation in the maritime domain, that resolve disputes peacefully within our region, which is what we've done in Bay of Bengal. 2, can you increase the capacity of the smaller states? 3, can you create maritime multilateral mechanisms, which we're trying to do with IONS, with IRA? Can we do more critical partners, outsiders who want to be willing to work with us. Maybe Japan is willing to work with us in creating connectivity, say, between South Asia and Southeast Asia. Take that. So I would say focus on doable, specific proposals and activity that has positive outcomes, and not frame that put India as a position that it is competing with Americans or the Chinese or Americans.
Somebody in the back, Ambassador, and then somebody in the back. Both. We'll take both.
Thank you very much, Ramada, and thank you, Raja, for a very inspiring talk. I wanted to highlight how much there is interest in actually compliance with UNCLOS. We talk about questioning as a whole the rule of law or rules-based international order by those holding power. But when you look in practice, the level of adherence to UNCLOS is incredibly high. One example, the largest shipping nations, the 6 largest, consult every year 2.5 days only on UNCLOS. So Russia, Japan, the United States, France, Germany, Britain. We consult at legal advisors level every year 2.5 days on minute questions of international law done under UNCLOS. When you say that there's a fundamental tension between law and power, yes it is. But I simply want to say to stick to rules has great advantages to those holding power and questioning it. Because if you're a dominant power, it adds legitimacy to your dominant rules, and it makes acceptance of the power you lay down cheaper, because it helps accepting your power if you can refer to legitimate ground. The second argument, sticking to rules is in the interest of a great power in the long run, because you will not be great power forever. And you might be very influential in one aspect, but not in the other aspect. So there are at least 2 great incentives for even dominant powers to stick to a certain degree to the rule of law. It was rather common.
Ambassador, you're a lawyer and you work in the legal domain, and you also bring the European perspective, which is that Europe as an empire of norms, Europe as a champion of norms. My sense is what we've seen in the last few years, what we saw happen in Europe, what Russian occupation and annexation of Crimea, there's very little Europeans can do, and Russia seems to be emboldened by it, and while it has sanctions, a whole lot of things, it has not stopped the kind of activity Russia does. Similarly here, I think the challenge here is far more deeper here, that the China feels existing order prevents it, limits its ambitions. Therefore, it is willing to pick and choose what parts of UNCLOS suits them. So the whole of South China Sea argument, it's a historical thing, UNCLOS does not apply. So and this is looking, even court has not even jurisdiction to hear the case. So I think here what we're seeing is a dramatic transformation of what we call it the balance of power, a new power that is rising. And rising powers in the past have tried to change rules. They've tried to impose their preferences on their neighbors. And not all neighbors here in Asia are willing to accept it, because nationalism is prevalent. Like in Doklam, we could have said, look, India just parked their troops and said, oh, you cannot throw me out if you want to, this sort of thing. But not everybody has that kind of, even deployable force. Philippines does not. So how do you deal with the power that is willing to use its military capabilities to alter the existing reality and create new facts on the ground? And that's the problem. I would say maybe, what you said, the security realm is far more complicated than the general functional realm. Actually, international law has expanded. There are a lot of legal luminaries here. Over the last 100 years, there is an international civil society. We do a lot of things without even thinking in maritime and a whole lot of other domains, rules of law. But moment security interests are involved, or very fundamental national interests of great powers are involved, then we are saying, look, rules are good for you, but rules are not good for you. multilateralism or international where it is convenient, multilateralism where it is necessary. So that what is not necessary. And I think that's what I was highlighting. In the case of UNCLOS, in the case of Asia, it's what is today, the contestation has become serious and vigorous, not just between the United States, also between the US and China, between Japan and China. So we're in a deeply troubled environment in our Asia's waters.
Vikas.
A very good evening to you, sir. I'm Wing Commander Vikas, Indian Air Force. Sir, I like the idea of you suggesting that why not convert the Bay of Bengal into regional cooperation area. Would you please bring out that SARC, as we have the name suggests, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. We have one organization with the same intention for so many years. So can you please bring out that what makes SARC not so effective and make you say that there is a need of something like this, maybe adding to more countries, some part of ASEAN or so where did it lack? Do we need to revamp the organization? Or what are the areas that we can improve so that this concept, if we try to bring it in the future, can be a success, not merely a discussion?
SARC is dead. You can revive it, but it's not India's problem. I think India's tried very hard to do something in a South Asian region. But Pakistani friends don't want it. That is the problem. Look, Pakistan is not interested. I'm not blaming them, not itself. Pakistan says, look, I would rather do CPEC rather than trade across Punjab. So that's the reality. Now, I would say, look, accept Pakistan's preferences. You know, keep saying SARC, we can sing till we are dropped dead. Pakistan does not even let out of the 900 items that we are allowed to trade with Pakistan. It limits what we can send across border, which is its closest market. Guys have the same language, they speak the same thing, they watch the same silly films. So now, but you don't want to open up and say it's easier to do business with Punjab rather than across the Karakoram through CPEC with the Chinese. But there's a difference. Pakistan, a sovereign state of Pakistan, has repeatedly told you that is his preference. Now you can say, look, you can wait for him to change his mind, or move on where there is a possibility to move. So it's not as if you're in a Roman Catholic marriage with SARC. What God has united, man cannot separate. But you can move. I mean, nobody's stopping you. Keep SARC on a two-speed frame. The Europeans can tell you more about it. But the rest of it, if Bay of Bengal, you can move forward. Why not move forward? If you can move forward on BBI, Bangladesh, India, Bhutan, and Nepal, move there. If you can move on BIMSTEC, move there. So the trick is to move wherever there is room. What happened in 2014 South Summit in Kathmandu? For years we were negotiating on a road agreement and a railway agreement. Pakistan was fully participant in those negotiations. Their officials had signed off on those negotiations, on the draft agreements. And Paul Nawaz Sharif was actually interested in doing things with India. Last minute says, look, I can't sign this. So we have to respect that. Look, the Pakistanis are not in a position, for whatever reason, to move on economic cooperation with India. If that is a fact, I would say I would deal with that fact. Not remain sentimental about SARC. So move where you can, rather than bemoan that the fact Pakistan is not ready to trade with you.
Thank you. Master, you have the last sentence.
Yes, just one final word perhaps. I'm Gudmundur Eriksson, I'll be speaking tomorrow. And I think we've heard tonight is exactly what a keynote address and earlier what the valedictorian address should be. Food for thought, and I've already researched what you've said and what Mr. Akbar said. I've already decided how to rearrange my speech tomorrow, which I hope you'll be here to see. As a small teaser for what I'm going to say, I want to react to a point that you made, that enforcement of law of the sea is not exemplified by the pictures we have here entirely. You have hinted at that. There are a lot of other ways how the law of the sea is enforced, not just by the military power that we see illustrated ahead of us. Thank you.
I think what we're seeing, just go by what's happened in Asia in the last year. We have a situation, as I said, of Philippines winning the argument in law. It's not in a position.
West, gives it a room that Russians never had, the Soviet Russians never had. So I think that's a challenge. I mean, but there could be alternative ways of approaching that. Maybe we'll discuss that in the next days.
Thank you, Dr. Raj Mohan, and thank you, friends, for a lively interactive keynote session. We are discussing a very important subject in UNCLOS. Dr. Raj Mohan has talked about the violations, the challenges that UNCLOS faces. I would say many United Nations laws and conventions, they face challenges. So every time one challenge is taken up, those who violate will say that, but you also have done it in so-and-so case, in some other convention, about some other convention. Friends, while Dr. Raj Mohan has focused largely on two big powers, which are seen to be entangled in this South China Sea dispute, I would only like to add that India as a country also has felt that it should also, if not play a very active role, it should articulate its viewpoint openly. We have done it, our Prime Minister has done it on at least 3 occasions in last 3 years. We have reiterated our commitment to free navigation, free overflights. Freedom of navigation and overflights must be respected by all countries. This we have not reiterated just as a Solomon principle alone. In the last few years, India has started looking eastwards. Seaward thinking has started. Oceanward thinking has started in India. Earlier, as Sri Akbar has said in his inaugural address, we used to have only the land-based thinking. We had a land connection with the Europe and beyond with America, although we crossed the Atlantic. But generally thinking has been westwards. We have never thought much about the big opportunity available on our east. But of late, we have started thinking eastwards. In fact, our Prime Minister says, whether you look westwards or eastwards, you still reach America. Don't worry. You may reach DC from here, you may reach Los Angeles from the other side. You still reach America. But Indians have that very important concern that you should reach America because my family is there. So, friends, we have started recognizing, acknowledging the importance of the seas, the oceans, and our east in the future of our country. From that perspective, UNCLOS becomes a very important subject for us in India. And in fact, the immediate dispute that we are talking about, the South China Sea dispute, it's not just that dispute which brings India into this discussion about UNCLOS. Technically speaking, our interests largely are tied to the Indian Ocean and South China Sea. Technically speaking, is not part of the Indian Ocean, but it's not about technicalities. UNCLOS as the guiding principle for managing the maritime affairs by the countries concerned needs to be strictly adhered to, and this whole, as Dr. Raj Mohan pointed out, the 21st century version of might is right, which we see probably is not good for any country. Friends, I end by just adding one more sentence. We are going beyond the UNCLOS in the sense that when the UNCLOS was framed, probably, we were too busy with our land-based affairs. We have not applied our minds to ocean-based affairs. We, when I say India, I'm talking about. Today, when we look to the East as a great opportunity and great necessity for India. We are looking beyond the present UNCLOS. Probably for countries in this region, the most happening region in the world today, namely the Indian Ocean region, everybody acknowledges the fact that the global power axis is gradually shifting to this region. 70% of the container trade happens in this region. Half of the world's submarines roam around, they say, in this region. Most important region. So probably either we should have a greater say in modifying and upgrading the UNCLOS, or maybe the countries in the region should come together to formulate a new code of conduct for the affairs in this region. Maybe towards that, probably we should gradually move. Dr. Raghumohan has referred to Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ranil Wickremesinghe highlights this aspect repeatedly after I have heard him speaking about creating an Indian Ocean version of UNCLOS, Indian Ocean Parliament probably to discuss about maritime affairs in the region. So from that perspective also, UNCLOS becomes a very important subject for us in India also. Friends, we have started the session with a very educative, illuminating keynote address of Dr. Raghumohan. I, on behalf of all of you, profusely thank him. Like we did in the previous session, I urge all of you to give him a good hand, congratulate him for his excellent